Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 56 of Days Gone By, the review series for Gran Turismo's classic car selection and some vintage models as well. And this particular model of car is a vehicle which has been updated on Gran Turismo to premium form. It didn't used to be, and it has been on the game for a fair while now. It's the Lotus Europa, but in particular the Europa Special. We will also be featuring the Europa S2 in a different episode. But this is the superior of the two in terms of sheer spec, and as I said, it is a full premium. It's not overly expensive as far as classic sports cars go, and it does offer a decent amount of performance and spec for that price. So what do you actually get? Because you don't really see that many people using Europas in general, either of the models really, but Lotuses are generally known for their handling. So can it be useful as a track car, not just as a classic, but potentially for seasonal events, online stuff, maybe even career mode? Well, as far as what you get a 1.6 litre turbochargeable mid-mounted engine. Definitely mid-mounted, you can tell that very easily. I've always thought that this car has quite a unique look to it. When I was much younger, when I first saw the car, I used to think it looked kind of like a weird little pickup truck because of that really strange, totally unique shape that the Europa has. And it's a great styling cue to have, the back end of the car that is, because it makes it memorable, it makes it stand out, it makes the car have its own signature that's different to any other classic in terms of its silhouette. And the car has quite a sporty stance. It doesn't have a huge amount of power to begin with, and even in fully tuned form, it's certainly not putting out the numbers of many other cars in this series. But Lotus models don't tend to have a huge amount of power. Even modern ones don't have a huge amount of power. They're still usually not running much more than, say, 300, maybe 350 horsepower at the most usually. This one, even in fully tuned form, is only putting out roughly the same kind of power as a stock Supra or a Skyline, 277 horsepower. Now that's not bad for a small, lightweight classic. That could potentially make it fly around the track in a similar way to stuff like the Dome Zero or the Suzuki GSX R4. Now the PP on this car is quite high, but understandably so. 535 is very high for a car with that kind of power. So why is it so high? Is it just the Red Bull Junior syndrome making it too high for its own good, or does it actually deserve to be? Because some cars genuinely do. Stuff like the Suzuki GSX-R is high for a reason. It's a fantastic track car and is one of the most dominating forces in seasonal racing and time trials especially. Now this car only weighs 649 kilos, and that's one of the reasons why the PP is so high. That is ultra low, even for a classic, and when you combine such a low weight, which is around 100 kilos lighter than the lightest of the Group C cars in the game, plus 277 horsepower, that's a pretty good combination to have. And with the fact that the engine is smaller, as you'd expect, you're not putting out a huge amount of torque. 206 foot-pounds isn't a massive amount by anyone's standards, but at the same time, it doesn't need a huge amount of torque, and a huge amount of torque in such a lightweight classic car would actually prove more problematic than it would be helpful. You'd end up just having rampant wheel spin because there's not enough weight to really get that power down to ground, in this case, the rear wheels. Now the horsepower per tonne is pretty good because of how low the weight is in particular. 427 is decent sports car territory, even compared to modern tuned sports cars, so you start to see why the PP is so high. Now I wouldn't necessarily recommend racing it at 535 PP because you can get some amazing cars at that level. You start moving up into R35 GTR territory, you could detune a Tommy Kyra ZZ2 down to that level quite easily, so whether or not it could genuinely rival cars like that, well that's a whole nother question. What it can do though is provide great handling, great cornering potential and cornering speed, and for a classic, surprisingly focused steering when tuned correctly. It doesn't really float around the road as some others like the Stratos have a tendency to do, and the fact that it is so good through the corners means that on certain tracks which require that kind of high speed flow without really wasting time, if you will, braking and changing gear, such as the Nürburgring to some degree, but tracks like Ascari as well, Tracks which actually are high-speed tracks, but they're very technical at the same time. Not so much tracks like Sierra, because that track requires a higher end flow. You need higher performance, say above 150 or so through most of the track, whereas this car isn't going to be running those kind of speeds. Whereas for the Nürburgring Ring, you're looking more about 100, 120 for that kind of classic lower powered vehicle. And this car can quite comfortably cope with that kind of requirement. Obviously on Ascari, the average speed is going to be a bit lower, but even so, the straights on that track are relatively short, the corners populate the track left, right and centre, and that's the kind of environment where you can use a car like this to your best advantage. The fact that it is compact, obviously super lightweight, and rear-wheel drive means that the manoeuvrability is fantastic. And all of that goes into what people expect of a Lotus. It is small, it is light, and it is great through the corners. Is it a straight line machine? No, definitely not. It's not slow in a straight line, but in particular the lack of top-end power just means that, of course, it's not going to rival really anything at the 535 pp level that much. It just doesn't have that kind of power. So it's one of those cars where if you use it in the right circumstance, it can be very useful. In fact, it's a great alternative to some of the more popular seasonal event PP racers like the Suzuki GSX-Rs and the Dome Zeros and the Mazda RX-500s, but you do need to be far more selective than some of those cars, which do have top-end performance, as to where and when you choose to use it. But overall, it's certainly a highly usable competition classic, which also makes a really nice car to drive and a great collector's piece. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.